name is Jeff Luna, admissions coordinator here at Holly Hall. I see some familiar faces. Welcome back. I do see a couple of new faces, so welcome to our Holly Hall Tuesday Talk for November. Our Tuesday talk for today is winter vegetable gardening for maximum deliciousness. It's a tongue twister. With Dany Millikin. He is the director of education at the Houston Botanic Garden. So I will welcome him here in a few minutes, but I do have a couple of sponsors for today's event. We have Hospice Plus and Nurturing Home Healthcare Agency. So I'm going to give them the opportunity to come and talk about their services. And if you need their services, feel free to contact them. So Rhonda, Veronica, and Armely.
I guess we'll stand. Are we in the camera?
I could fix that.
Okay. So hello, again, my name is Veronica. I'm with Hospice Plus. Armely is our clinical liaison. We are so happy to partner with Holly Hall today to be able to do this Talk Tuesday. I won't be long. I think the biggest thing that we want to do as healthcare providers is provide continuing education. We want to leave some information behind on hospice, and we would love to do a one-on-one with anybody who's interested in getting some information about the benefits of hospice. So again, my name is Veronica. I'm with Hospice Plus, and this is Armely, our clinical liaison. All right, thank you guys.
Hello, I'm Rhonda with Nurturing Home Healthcare, and I'm very excited to partner with Holly Hall for the Talk Tuesday. In regards to home health care, we provide all of the disciplines for your patients, such as skilled nursing, physical therapy, occupational therapy, wound care. We have several different we have Spanish speakers on staff as well as Vietnamese speakers on staff that can help with patients, and Filipino providers on staff, clinicians. We are very excited because we have been able to take care of several patients at Holly Hall. And if you have any questions regarding our services, please let me know. We can have imaging done here as well. If patients need x-rays or ultrasounds, Dopplers, anything of that nature, as long as they're on home health, we can get them taken care of. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Veronica and Rhonda and Armely. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dany Millikin with the Houston Botanic Garden. He is the director of education. So welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. I am going to sit down here just because, we're talking through some stuff. I will reference the screen from time to time so you'll get to see all the sides of my face. So lucky you. All right. So I'm Dany Millikin. I'm director of education at Houston Botanic Garden. And I thought it was so wonderful to hear about all the different languages that in this city we've got to speak to service because it's such a multicultural diversity. And we celebrate that at Houston Botanic Gardens. In fact, our most kind of beautiful organized formal garden is based on it's kind of an homage to the diversity of our city. So we're real proud of that. This that you're seeing right now is just our entrance. That's right next to the box office window that hopefully you visit all the time to get your tickets as you go in. And it's a beautiful space. So today's subject will be focused on maximum deliciousness, but it's kind of a little bit sneaky because when it comes to produce, delicious and nutritious are the exact same thing. So all food has sugars in it. When it comes down to it, more tasty food, that tomato that you prefer to get from the grocery store, but you never can quite find when you grow it at home, it's so good, so robust, so much flavor. That is just more complicated sugars in that tomato than in that kind of liquid cardboard one that you've had that experience with so many times. So there's a little rating called the BRIX rating, BRIX, and this is a gauge that kind of NASA uses to gauge the nutritional content of produce. So for the space station, they can only have maximum nutritional density for their food because they can only ship so much of it. Space shuttle's expensive shuttle. So we could do the same thing. Wineries and breweries both also use bricks because their job is to kind of test flavor. And it helps us too. Now, one thing that NASA discovered about bricks is the only way to increase the nutritional content, increase the flavor of produce is by improving the soil where the produce is grown. And so that kind of brings us to the conversation of soil. So really this is a how to be a soil rancher talk as well as a veggie gardener. So next slide here is going to be just kind of these components of soil. When it comes down to it, there's 5 components of soil. There we go. There's air. So you maybe not realize it, but there's all this air in soil. The best soil is open and fluffy and airy. That's space for roots, for earthworms, for all the stuff earthworms eats, the bacteria, the protozoa, everything that's down there. It also helps hold a lot of water, which is our next component of soil. Then minerals, our Houston gumbo, this rich clay that we've got. It's a hassle to work with, but it's got a ton of minerals in it. Almost all the ones that plants needs are provided by the clay in your backyard. And so if we can just get a little more air and water in there, we'll be helping out. The way we do that is by adding the next two, organic matter and organic mass. And so those two are part of it. So at the Botanic Garden, we have all these different areas all over that represent plants from all over the globe. And you may wonder how we're able to do that, kind of keeping soil in mind. And we did that because we were able to specifically create each bed with its drainage, with its soil requirements, and something like that. Because when it comes down to it, a Botanic Garden is a museum for plants. And so we want the healthiest plants we can get. We're trying to keep them alive, keep a collection there. And so we're keeping close track on our soils as well. And so Botanic Garden is a little different than a park, right? Parks are places to go play. They're management of a green space. A Botanic Garden is kind of a museum, a living museum. So we do have a plants records manager position that'll be posted soon. So pretty exciting about that because that's one thing that sets us apart is having plant collections. Every plant needs a slightly different soil profile, and we'll look at some soil profiles that we've dealt with here in the next one. So you can see here, we've really reduced our soil profiles to things that we understand really well. You have clay, and you have sand, and you have loam, and there's kind of a combo of all of those. The top slice in the clay, the sandy clay loam and the sandy loam is less healthy, and the bottom is healthy soil. And as we look at those things, we see the structure, and we see much bigger clumps, much fewer roots, right? In the top version, less air, less water gets in that soil, probably similar mineral content, but when you have compaction, what happens is a lot of your minerals will off-gas, especially the smaller ones. And so we can trust that bottom row there of soil has more minerals and will allow more root growth. In fact, we see roots almost all the way down in all of our good structure. And that should point us to this reality that we actually can increase the health of the soil by encouraging roots. Roots are a way to get organic matter into the soil. Organic matter is just plant material, old plant waste. So a lot of times we think of compost and mulch as our primary organic matter, but roots are pumping exudate into the soil, filling the soil up with another type of organic matter that we often forget, root exudate. So this is a carbohydrate-rich, protein-rich material that comes out of the roots. And it is a wonderful stuff. It feeds the soil, it feeds those microbes in the soil, and it also can do a really cool job of getting chemical messages to the fungi, to the bacteria in the soil. And what that allows is the plant to communicate its needs. Let's say the plant needs iron. It can pump these messages in the soil, and sure enough, that fungal system that's there will bring in iron. Kind of incredible. It's this newer information in the last 10 years. This is all coming out. What plants are doing when they combine with fungi in the soil. So compost is its own thing. It's a phenomenal material. It's probably the easiest way to get organic matter into the soil. It also has organic mass into it. We're gonna talk a little bit about some of the benefits of compost here. So compost, you'll see that second bullet point there, 300 pounds of humic acid per yard. And so that's a 3 by 3 by 3 square a yard. And 300 pounds of humic acid is a ton. If you divide that out and just put it into bags, you'd be talking hundreds of dollars of material in that yard of compost. Well, what it does is a large molecule that we'll explore later on, and it bonds together clay molecules to open up the soil. When we think of that good structure, we have bonded together little pieces, and that's what gives a lot of air. Compost through the humic acid does loosen and till compacted soil. Generally, compost has a ton of bacteria. Bacteria is nitrogen rich, and so you're adding nitrogen fertilizer when you put down compost, which is phenomenal. Encourages root growth. It's got some hormones in it that does that. Same thing with building plants' natural immunity by encouraging that root zone to get so much healthier. You have natural immunity. It's that lovely dark brown color is related to that humic acid. It's a dark, dark brown. And you want to build soil diversity just like the Botanic garden. We want plant diversity. Just like our world, we want human diversity. Soil diversity outcompetes bad elements. So pests, bugs, disease, things like that. And our next slide, we're going to talk about organic mass. So organic mass is the living portion of the soil. And so we call that the soil food web in the soil. We generally think of the soil as being a food chain, right? Where one thing eats one thing, something else eats that, something else eats that. What's that?
Can we use the machine?
That's fine with me. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, you got nothing going on here?
You're going to learn a ton about gardening while we do it. So.
We'll listen.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And so in the soil food web, you can see there, it starts with the plants. And we know that because we realize that plants are really dictating and communicating to this food web. You see organic matter again, that's the waste from the plants themselves. And then you've got the things that eat that waste. So it might be fungi, it might be bacteria. So there's two different groups here. There's the fungal group, and then there's the bacteria group. So bacteria is very high nitrogen. When protozoa, basically we know protozoa because they eat bacteria. When they eat the bacteria, they leave a lot of nitrogen waste behind. That's instant boost of health for the plant. You want a green, healthy plant. You want to get bacteria in that space to feed your protozoa. Little bit kind of a weird approach there, but when it comes down to it, that's the quickest way to get new green growth. You want disease and bug protection. That's where you try to build up your fungi. And so we do that with things like molasses, super seaweed, or fish emulsion. That can really build up a fungal population. I do want to say the one thing about bacteria populations is that most of our diseases are biological in nature, right? And so we have a problem that's biological. Your best solution is to try to consider the soil food web, right? And this is really what NASA's talking about when they think about maximizing that bricks, maximizing nutrition and deliciousness is letting the plant have a system that it can dictate, it can thrive within. So that's where the soil food web comes in. And eventually, our creatures get bigger and bigger. And the earthworms, they eat a lot of the bacteria, a lot of the protozoa. Nematodes are another type of worm, somewhat smaller than earthworms, but they do the same thing. Then you start getting into arthropods, the bugs, the birds, the mammals, the lizards, all that stuff that in the end eat it. But when they die, when they leave their waste, they're again improving the soil food web. So kind of cool thing on food coming from the soil is the better soil we get, the better soil we have, the better food we get. That could be taste, that could be nutrient, all of that stuff. And so the other way that we maximize our nutrition is by reducing stress. And so what do the plants need? What do they want? When you're designing a space, you're trying to plan a space for maximum deliciousness, what do they need? So that's our next slide here. The first thing they need is light. Veggies need more than 6 hours of light per day. So there's really no flexing that. There's no way to reduce that. That is what they need, 6 hours a day. Morning light is the best. If you can start with morning light, that's better. That's stress-free, right? A lot of times we're looking at the west side of our house. You think about that midday sun starting with the summer day, midday sun, the temperature in that space is jumping from 80 to 100 in a matter of minutes. And that's adding stress. That's going to reduce the nutritional content in your veggies. So if you have to grow veggies on the west side of your house, slide it away from the house a little bit. Get it out there so it gets that morning sun. The earlier the exposure, the better. Midday in summer can be pretty brutal, pretty stressful. And so that's another thing to protect from. So southern exposure for winter and dappled shade in summer are the two ways we reduce stress with light. But you got to keep in mind those veggies need 6 hours a day. So another thing that we're talking about when we talk about access is the human element, right? There's that old adage that what's the most important thing you can add to your garden? Your shadow, right? You've heard that? It's like a great adage that, as you think about it, attention is that thing that you can add. Well, if we're thinking about strategizing and designing, how do we add attention? We have to plan for it. So visual access to your garden. I've seen gardens back around like a garage, or around the side of the house where you don't see it from the back or the front door. I've seen them just places where you don't see them. So you want to put these things, especially veggies, where you're going to see them on a regular basis. Physical access is key. You're always going to be adding new compost to it, new veggies to it. Sometimes a pretty big bring in that you'll do with some soil if it gets low. And then I always like to say emotional access is a big deal, right? It's the most difficult. So if you're connected to that bed or those beds, you're going to be using them a lot more often. And so when we think about it, we want to plan something that we're drawn to. We want to plan it in such a way that we want to go out there on a regular basis. I love coffee. Maybe it's a little a chair and a small table for me to have my morning coffee out there. If I could do things like that, then I will increase my success. I'll reduce pest and disease because my eyes will always be on those veggie beds. And so that emotional access too can just be attractiveness. I remember at my house, I have these beds, right? They're all lined up. And, I made space for them. There's a little picnic table out there, but they were just kind of out in their own area back in the lawn. And I made a nice looking little pathway from my back patio to the beds. And next thing I know, my wife and daughters are out there gardening because something drew them out. There was emotional access that was built. And this is all just a little bit of planning. You can correct it, but when it comes down to it, you want to build these 3 types of access. A great place to start is a clean slate. So if you've got a space where you want to put a veggie bed, I would just go ahead and remove everything that's there. That may sound a little bit aggressive, but when it comes down to it, you don't have to do a ton of space, but just simplify it, clean it out a little bit. If you don't do that, it's hard to imagine what you can do. And so here's a bed. This is cultivare, one of my beds there. And one little change we did here is instead of those right angle beds where everything was rectangular, we made them angled, right? We put that little slant on them. So they're 35 degree on that short angle, 165 or whatever, 155 is the other one. But it added this kind of invitation. And so you go there on an afternoon and people are invited to walk into those things because it's something a little bit different. You see those beds in the middle, they have a post that comes up about 4 inches higher than the side. The intention is that you can put a tabletop on that. You can just plop a tabletop up on there. Next thing you've got a table that is also your garden bed. Add some use, add some interest to it. There's just ways to do that don't have to break the bank. A little bit of rotation might be all that needs to happen. Maybe not doing one, 8 by 20 bed, but dividing that up into smaller spaces, giving you pathways. You are not supposed to walk on your veggie beds, so you might as well design pathways in there instead of just walking on that soil that you paid a lot for. Pathways are less expensive than veggie bed soil. So in Houston, every few, we got a little spacing problem, but it's, computers, right? But every few weeks, we change the crops that we need to be growing every few weeks. So it's really kind of wild. This type of year in fall, we're moving into winter crops. My 2 favorites to be doing are collard greens and kale. These are going to grow all winter. You're going to get a ton of produce from them. You like carrots? A bunch of carrots from seed. Same with lettuce. They're the kind of thing that's hard to eat too much of. Number one thing to be doing right now is onions. Lots and lots of onions, right? Because when we're cooking, what do we use the most of? I mean, in my house, it's onions and garlic. And so I'm encouraging you guys to grow lots of green onions. They're very easy to do here all winter long. And by the end of the year, you'll have a ton of those little bunchers. So some things that are always great to do, bush beans are always great. So that's green beans when it comes down to it. I've fallen in love with a new type of perennial spinach called Malabar spinach. And you can get it at a lot of retail shops now, but it's a little bush and it makes a delicious leaf and you got it all year long. Does need shade in summer, but the rest of the year just goes right back out in the garden. So really cool stuff. Hopefully you guys can see some of the stuff that we're growing here. Seeds are key. We talked about how important roots are. When you grow a plant from seed, that root system is what's ideal genetically for that plant, right? It's seeking into the soil. It may take a little bit longer, so you got to start a little bit earlier. If you're growing from a potted plant, a lot of times you get the roots that are just going kind of in a circle or a square, which is not what the seed is genetically inclined to do root wise. So just keep that in mind when you're planting from plants or seeds. So I do like my broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts to be grown in plants. Those aren't too assertive with root growth. But when it comes down to that list there, peas, collards, arugula, cilantro, garlic, chives, among others, I'm going from seed every single time. So I think I see the word carrots up there too. Lettuce, soup de glup, thumb also. So that, no, it doesn't say that. Just kidding. Just kidding. So when it comes to plants, a big subject is what about weeds? I hate weeds. And so when we're looking at the soil, right, there's a few things that are happening. Compaction is a huge deal that can happen with the soil. And if we haven't been mulching our veggie beds, a lot of times that's what leads to compaction is a lack of mulch, right? Because our rain, you know, as we know, it comes in events. You know, we don't have rains anymore. We have rain events now, right? It's like hammering the soil. And if you don't have mulch over it, leaves, kind of hardwood mulch or pine straw, you're going to get compaction. And so compaction, nutrient deficiency, or overwatering, these are the things that point us to weeds. And so as we look at this kind of like group here, if you have tap roots like dandelion in your bed, so it could be hawkweed, a lot of different these tap roots, it means you probably have a compacted soil. That can lead to nutrients deficiency. So the way you overcome that is humic acid, right? Nitrogen fixtures like clover, you know, might be seeing some other nitrogen fixtures like sorrel, something like that. And if you've got a nitrogen fixer like clover, all that means is that it probably points to your use of fertilizer, that you're using a chemical fertilizer that is dissipating in the winter. It's gone. And you don't have any nitrogen available in your soil. And so nature's providing clover for you, right? So anytime you see like a big bank of clover, you could be like, oh, that person's probably using Weed and Feed or Scott's or Miracle Grow, something like that, instead of turning to compost as a fertilizer. And we'll explore fertilizers a little bit later on. Then you have water lovers. I know that you're proud you have an irrigation system. It's really good you got that. Way to go. Big installation. Turn it off, right? The plants will tell you when they need more water, right? You know when it's been dry. These aren't like mysteries, right? Houston, it rains a lot. We have some of the highest rainfall in the world for a city our size. And when it comes down to it, too much water leads to compacted soils. You get erosion. That means mineral loss. So keep that in mind as you're watering. It also means you're going to see things like Virginia buttonweed, nutsedge. These are generally signs of too much water. Might be in your veggie bed, might be in your lawn. And then there's just low succession plants that can thrive after the nuclear bomb hits. You know, the first plants that comes back. If you've got that in your lawn, it just means that your lawn you have poor soil. Maybe it's a new residence, right? Maybe you've mistreated your lawn or your previous owner did or something like that. Well, that's where compost comes in really as a day saver, because it has everything that your lawn needs, that your soil needs without kind of messing anything up. So keep that in mind. So it's interesting, you know, a lot of our solutions is compost, and a good compost is an amazing gift to soil. So in a lawn, there are some like-minded weeds. Now they don't have minds, so they're not really like-minded, but they do like the same thing as a veggie crop does. And in that situation, you know, generally you can just hand weed. So that might be horse herb or a Texas star daisy, a lot of little plants that are like that. So, and those you can just leave them alone or you can hand pull them. They're usually food for some native creature. So, okay. So then we get to talking about roots. We've kind of touched on this a couple of times, but roots are really where it's at. I like to think of the method I talk about when I'm gardening as being a root first gardening. So that means if your soil is healthy, your roots are healthy. If your roots are healthy, then your plant is thriving. You're getting more produce that's tastier and you have fewer problems. And so kind of becoming a focus of our mission is improving roots. We kind of see through some of the stuff that happened with roots. They hold the soil in place. So a lot of you, right, have had the experience where you've got this big live oak tree or a neighbor's got it in the front yard, and you look down and you see these big roots that are above the ground. And people are like, why did the roots come up? Roots don't go up. That's not the way they go. The soil has gone away. right? Either compaction or erosion. One of those two have happened under that tree to create that situation. And so our best bet is to barely cover them with mulch or compost, right? Adding soil back to the space. I mean, I had a guy ask me, hey, it looks like my oak tree's roots are coming up. It's okay if I cut them off because I want to mow and it's harder. And I was like, no, man, you can't cut the roots off. That's not what you can do. So roots also are always adding organic matter. They're communicating with that soil food web through their exudate. That's a big function they're doing. They're actually feeding the soil so the soil will bring them nutrients and water. There it is again, feed the soil food web. It's this phenomenal thing that happens. They mine nutrients, right? If you think about feeding the soil food web, they're pumping this exudate in the ground. One of my favorite soil biologists calls it pancake dinner for microbes. It's got a lot of carbs, a lot of sugars, a little bit of protein. I guess that's the bacon you'd have at a pancake dinner, or the milk, you know what I mean? And then it innervates the soil a lot, but it's as it kind of shoots it out of the root tip, it sort of also serves as a mining agent, right? You get this hub of activity. Now there's a little bit more space cleared, so the roots can go a little bit further. Pretty awesome stuff it's doing. Roots also return nitrogen to the soil. A lot of that happens through that soil food web. But when it comes down to it, in a healthy setting, you have a lot of different roots kind of working together, and they can oftentimes feed each other different things that they need. They share stuff. And also, there's a term called turgidity. Like if a root is turgid, it's full of water, and roots can hold a ton of water. So if you have healthy roots in your soil, it could be your lawn, could be your trees. When that flood happens, when those rain events happens, your roots can use up a ton of water and just hold it. So it's not going down the bayous, it's not going to your neighbor's house. It's pretty incredible when you have healthy roots, the amount of positive that can happen. So we talk about water all the time. I get to deal with horticulture experts all the time, and I'm always asking them, what's the big mistake Houstonians are making? What is it? The big mistake, right? Kind of giving it away here on the slideshow, but it is that we water too much. We're over-watering our plants. So with fruit trees, people are planting them too low. And then when you plant them too low and you overwater, you just flood those roots. And that is not ideal. And so we want to water less. Really, right? We want to water the perfect amount. That's what we want to do. We want to water the perfect amount. Well, you don't know how to do it, but there are tools. One of them is this great tool called Texas ET. ET is evapotranspiration. So evaporation and transpiration, transpiration is the breathing of a plant, right? That's all the water that's left the area. And so it's simple math. You have the rainfall, you have the ET. And so if the ET is higher than the rainfall, then you need to water. If the rainfall is equal to or higher than the ET, then you do not need to water. So basically, if it's rained an inch in the last week, something like that, right? And so this great thing is, this is my house, right? I have full sun, I have St. Augustine. This is about 3 weeks ago. So water requirement for my turf drive is 0.029. So that's just like a matrix that it has for me. And then we had a little rain, an inch or so fell, and the requirement minus the rainfall. So that one is how many inches of rain does my yard need once I subtract the rainfall? And it's 0, right? Then you got my sprinklers. I can add up to an inch an hour or a ½ inch an hour. And so how long do I need to run my sprinklers? It says it right there, 0 minutes. So by this math, it's telling me that I'm gaining more water than I'm losing. I mean, you do this in your, in your kitchen, right? You do it in your bank account. You do it in all these places where, what we get and what we give, they need to match up. And we're putting way too much water down when we sprinkle, 3 times a week, 15 minutes a time, right? That's just, we're killing our grass, we're killing our trees, we're killing our veggie beds. So just slow the watering down. You'll have a lot healthier plants, and you'll have deeper roots, which is again, our big thing. So when we're dealing with a lot of these problems we've got, if you imagine Harvey, right? 4 feet of water or more, right? 4 to 5 feet of water fell on our spaces. That is so much weight that collided with your ground. And I know it was a few years ago now, but a lot of people haven't done any remediation. And so what that means is they've still got a ton of compaction. it is problematic because that means there's no air or water access to their soil. And so what can we do to kind of overcome compaction? We've got it right there. Compost top dressing is far and away the most beneficial thing you can do to overcome compaction. That is just where every square inch of the space you're trying to remediate, you put about a quarter inch or less of compost down. I like Landscaper's Pride, Nature's Way Resources, Farm Dirt for this purpose. The Ground Up's doing a fine job for doing compost top dressing. So that kind of covers most of the area of city that you can go get compost and put it very thinly out everywhere. And most of those sites have a compost calculator that you can go on and see how much you need in bulk. So the next thing is humic acid. We mentioned it already, but it comes in a dry form, Humates Plus. That's really easy to put out with a spreader. And lastly, mowing at the correct height when it comes to your lawn. And this isn't deliciousness really, but this is a big thing, is if we're putting too much pressure on our plants, then we will reduce their success, right? We'll reduce their health level. And correct water use, which we've touched on already. I'm not gonna lecture anymore on the water. I think you know, don't water too much. All right, but compaction is our biggest problem. This is our biggest problem. This is what we need to overcome. And the handiest tool you possibly have is compost. And I know that may sound wild just to say so my problem is I gotta put dirt everywhere. My solution is I gotta put dirt everywhere. It helps, right? It's got the humic acid, it's got the living entity. So bacteria, right? Bacteria, 20% nitrogen. Each bacteria body is 20% nitrogen. It is one of the most nitrogen-rich things on the planet. And there's a ton of it in compost. So you're automatically putting down this nitrogen that the plants can use immediately right when you put it down. So just keep that in mind. Watering smart is a huge deal. What do our plants need? Kind of touched on this a little bit. Water only when needed. I can tell you this right now is when it comes to my lawn, I haven't watered since 2011. So, and I'm using ET data. I'm paying attention to that. Do I have problems with the lawn? No. Brown patch, chinch bugs, sod webworms, they don't affect my lawn because I've put down compost enough times and I don't stress it out by watering it too much. I get a few weeds in spring, but they're quickly compact. They're quickly outcompeted by my St. Augustine. And I mow at 3.5 inches. I'm not mowing like super high on it. I keep it pretty tight on that section. So, and then feeding, right? So you see on there, I have in all caps, it says no salts. So obviously we're not like taking our Morton's table salt with or without the iodine and sprinkling on the yard or our garden. We wouldn't do that because we know that kills, right? We know that table salt kills plants. Well, most fertilizers are salts. They're a water-soluble compound that divides into two different ions, positive and negative. And in theory, the negative ion is supposed to stick to your root. So it's kind of like a game of luck, a game of chance when you're using that type of fertilizer. And so I would not use it. I would turn to companies like Nitrofloss has their Sweet Green. Microlife has a ton of stuff. There's another one, Nelson Plant Food. They're doing a really good job by making kind of a food-based, right, fertilizer that you use to the feeding those microbes that are already in your soil, already ready to do all the work, and you can just feed them. And you think about the word fertilization, right? It means to make fertile. That's like literally what it means. So you want to choose fertilizers that make your soil fertile. That salt stuff drives away living organisms. Only one type of organism on this planet, terrestrial organism, likes salt. They're called halophiles. Almost every single one of them are disease organisms. Almost every single one. So if we're making our soil saltier and saltier and saltier through ionically compounded fertilizers, we're going to have problems. So where we've got the kind of word art on that last slide is just talking about when you use salt fertilizers, you require more pesticides, more herbicides, more fungicides. The costs build up. And so the next slide is just kind of comparing to fertilizers. One, you're going to love this, the Green Up 15510 Lawn Special Lawn Fertilizer is a bag they use, the exact same bag, Twin Pines road salt, the exact same product in a different bag is Twin Pines road salt. So you have this product that is legitimately salt for melting ice on roads, and it's also used as a Green Up. So what kind of unhealth is that, right? If you ate salt only for a meal, you would not live. It just wouldn't work. You get lots of minerals, but your gut biome will be totally wiped. So the one on the right is a phenomenal locally made fertilizer. And these guys aren't paying me money to say this. They're just doing a great job. And you can't really see here, but if we could zoom in a little box with a small font, it has a long list, or we're going to try, we're doing it. We're going for it here. We're zooming in: alfalfa, fish meal, kelp milk, soy milk, wheat middlings, right? Then back one, you wouldn't eat that, but those first 6 really sound like food. And that is what they are. They are made to enrich the soil. It's safe for you. It cannot burn your plants, and it works really, really well. And so in a nutshell, our big goal with growing food for deliciousness is soil care. We are trying to improve our soil, to keep our soil at the maximum level we can. And what's really cool is whatever effort you put into that, if it's compost or good fertilizer or not stressing it out, it is residual. It actually builds over time, right? And it's not like the thing where you put it down and then you got to put it down again. No, you don't have to do that. You're actually building a natural system that builds on itself, and it's incredible. So here's just a few things that I really encourage you guys to think about using in your gardens. And this will literally lead to tastier food. And that tastier food, be it apples, peaches, or tomatoes, will be better for you. Up to 5 times more nutritious. That's what you can do at your house versus what's in the grocery store. Yeah, 5 times. Yeah. But so we're composting a lot, right? We're making sure our beds are mulched and composted. And that is just going to do so much to help you reduce weed pressure, reduce pest pressure, and have healthier plants. Microlife products are phenomenal. If you're trying to get more production, alfalfa meal is a sneaky little trick, because it actually boosts the hormones that tell the plant to make more flowers. And so it could be roses, could be camellias, could be peppers, right? More flowers, more peppers. It's that easy if you have the bees. Horticulture molasses is this awesome, pests hate it, caterpillars can't eat it, right? Bugs don't like the smell of it, but bacteria love it. So if you overspray your plants with this, it drips on the soil. Now you've got a fertilized and protected plant. Fish meal is great for nitrogen. And then of course, humic acid, we've mentioned that multiple times, as a great carbon source, and also kind of soil opener, right? It opens the soil up for healthier soils. So that is, soil care is how you get better food. It's how you get a disease-free lawn. It's how you can kind of go without watering in your lawn, and also how you get trees that aren't going to drop limbs all the time. So if you applied everything we have to your pecans, you wouldn't get limb drop, you get better production. To your pears, you wouldn't get plum crucillo on them, you wouldn't get rust on them, you get better production. All the comments are going to end with, and then you get better production, because that is how we're doing. And we're talking about using nature as an ally instead of trying to pump chemicals that way. So please contact me. I got a website there, homeshowgardenpros.com. I have a radio show. Didn't really mention that. Or you can email me. I love direct email, Dany@hbg.org. If you're wondering why there's one N, my parents wanted to name me McDaniel, but they couldn't quite get themselves to do it. So they just gave me the shorter Dany. I'm like, go with McDaniel. I can be Mickey D, it'd be pretty cool. So please email me, contact me via the website, however you want to. And then just, thank you. I think we are opening up to questions. That's our Sims Bayou at the Houston Botanic Garden. So you kind of see both sides of the garden there. But yeah, I don't know if we've got questions or not, but we welcome them if we do.
I do have one. Can you hear me?
Sort of, yeah. Let's, I'll listen.
Okay, so you can't hear me?
Are you windy?
Yes, I'm windy. Okay, well, I make my own compost. I use Microlife, but I'm wondering, when you're saying overwatering, because people may not understand, doesn't the city water, when you irrigate, doesn't have a lot of salt or chlorine in it?
So those
rainwater's better?
Those are solids. It has fluoride and has chloramine. And those two things are not good for bacteria. That's why they put them in, right? To clean the pipes out so we don't have infested water when it comes out.
Yeah, that's why rainwater's so much better. Now, somebody told me it's
hold on real quick. Those solids are not effective for damaging soil, right? So they're not going to change the soil. They can eventually, over time, if you keep using them, they can build up and stymie seed growth. And so a lot of times people are wondering why they can't start seeds in their soil. It's because they've been using so much city water that they've stopped that. And then also they can lead to leaf diseases. And so things like rust or black spot often are really bad when a sprinkler spray is spraying onto a plant. And so, but they're not going to lead to less delicious produce when it comes down to it. So there is a filter you can put on your hose called a Buddy Blue or Blue Bubba or something like that. I'll come up with the name of it and we'll get it out there, but it's it just goes on your nozzle and you put your hose on it and it filters out the fluoride especially, which is the real culprit.
Okay.
So, but you were about to say something else, Wendy.
Yeah, no, also I heard that some people say you can put the real one, not the kind you bathe with, Epsom salt on your citrus trees.
Yeah, so
Because it
that
is
is a way to,
salt.
that is a way to add minerals to a space, right? Because Epsom salt is magnesium. And the real one is still just two molecules, right? Sodium and magnesium. And so, or magnesium and chloride, one of the two. So I would use Nature's Way remineralizer or azomite, both inert, that will be used by the soil food web, and then top them off with a little bit of compost way before I used Epsom salt. And so if you do want to use Epsom salt, get like, a couple tablespoons of it in a gallon of water and pour that out. So, but I'm not a huge fan of using Epsom salt. I've had just great results with using kind of inert minerals like green sand or granite sand, stuff like that, that have, 30, 40 minerals, because Epsom salt is just 2 minerals.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Great questions there. And there's so much information out there, right? It's like the internet has so much information, and then there's all the things that people have done 3 or 4 times that work really well. And so it's like, do they work the 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th time, right? Are they going to work for a long time? Are they going to make it better? And so one treatment of Epsom salt is probably not going to be a big deal. 10 of them, though, that starts being limiting. One thing that people see when they do that is they start seeing whitefly a little more often. And that's a pretty good sign that they've started to oversalt their plant. Now, I will also say Epsom salt on an avocado tree will kill it pretty quickly. And so that's, it's one of the plants that you definitely have a big sensitivity to salt on those. Your indoor plants, a lot of times are struggling with it. Like if you're growing Sansevieria and the edge of that plant or mother-in-law's tongue, real complimentary. But it's if it's singeing on the edge, that's salt poisoning. And that is where ideally you're rinsing it out with rainwater. So, yeah. Any other questions out there? We'd love to, yeah.
Yeah, let's see, it's a 2-parter.
Ooh.
Can I eat the flowers and seeds that I grow on my basil? This is from Juanita.
Absolutely. I use them when I do my Italian food at home. So if I'm doing spaghetti sauces and stuff like that, I prefer the stronger kind of stronger flavored flowers and seeds. So I will save them actually for that use. They freeze pretty well and you can use them in sauces. So if you're doing like a salad or something where you're doing like a caprese or something like that, the leaf is way better, but because it's got less flavor, not more flavor.
And then she also said, do I still need to use compost if I use microlife on my plants, gardenia and basil? My Malabar spinach is just beautiful.
Nice. Yeah. Love Malabar. This is its peak season where it's starting to put those berries on. Yeah, I prefer compost to microlife if you are choosing one or the other, or take turns, right? Do 1 year, do only compost, next year, do only microlife, or maybe it's every 6 months, something like that. My question though is, are your plants in the ground or are they in pots? Maybe you could answer that in the chat, because if they're in the ground, compost is extremely beneficial, especially if kind of things are doing pretty well or you've seen any stress. Microlife is wonderful in the ground because it is inoculated with a few soil organisms, like soil microbes, and so it's a good way to inoculate soil. In a pot, I generally would tend to use kind of higher, like I would use a Microlife Ultimate, but mostly in pots, I prefer to use liquid fertilizers like their seaweed or like Medina's has to grow, things like that, because you can imagine in a pot, you have evaporation, but you also have drainage. You have literally holes at the bottom that are the water stringing out. And so if you can add a little bit of fertilizer every time, a lot of people are seeing great success that way.
She says the plants in gardenia are in the ground, the basil, rosemary, and malabar in pots.
I will say this too, is that if you're doing good with gardenia, keep up whatever you're doing. Tons of people are struggling that way. So it's like, it seems like Harvey seemed to wipe those out. I would guess there's like a third of the gardenia around the city than we used to have because of it. So, and then the big freeze hit the citrus. So it's always sad.
Where can you find Microlife? Who carries it?
Yeah, if you want to go to homeshowgardenpros.com, we do have a product finder. Microlifefertilizer.com has a product finder. And so that one's probably the most thorough of all of them. I buy it at Southwest Fertilizer. They have all the kinds there, I think. And then, I mean, Ace has them, pretty much all your retail garden shops besides the big tent one.
Bearings has them.
Which one? Who was that?
Bearings has it.
Bearings, yeah, that's a great location for it.
The
Both
Southwest
locations.
Fertilizer, Bearings, or Southland Hardware, they all have it.
Yeah. So pretty much anywhere that's not a
Wabash.
major chain is going to have it.
Yeah, and
It's
Wabash,
local.
if you live north town.
I frequent Southwest Fertilizer a lot, so I just never looked for it there. I'll look for it. Thank you.
Yeah, when you walk in past the plants on that side, they have their organic corner, and it's really well stocked. And that's where the Microlife is.
Another question. Some guidelines as far as regarding over fertilizer.
Yeah, so as we kind of explore the nature of salt fertilizer versus food-based fertilizer, stuff that makes things fertile. Salt-based fertilizer is the only one you can over fertilize with, right? You can't over fertilize with something that is just going to end up being food. So if you ever put down Microlife and you'll see there's a fuzz that grows on it sometimes, that's one of the inoculated fungi in there actually beginning to grow. And so over-fertilization can lead to a lockup of minerals. So as we mentioned there, those are ionic compounds going in. And if a positive one comes across and hits a negative one, they could bond together and they could end up locking up more of your nutrients than you intended. You intended to add nutrients and now you're locking them up. It's a real shame. And so, I mean, for me, I'm not using Miracle Grow at all in the soil for that reason. And Miracle Grow is probably the best of all of them. And so that's my take on it. I might just stick to, about every 2 months, no matter what you're fertilizing. When you're putting new plants in the veggie beds, that's when I put in some like liquid seaweed, or Dakota Rev is a really good liquid fertilizer. So that's what I'm doing, is about every 2 months. And then when I'm adding new plants into my veggie bed, I'm adding some liquids.
Juanita said today, all of a sudden this morning, my leaves are yellow today on my gardenias.
Yeah.
Southwest Hardware has Microlife.
Southwest Fertilizer, yeah. So about the gardenias, this is humic acid to the rescue. So there's another product that's really cool that opens the soil up and adds a little bit of inoculant to it. It's called Dakota Rev. I briefly mentioned it. It is somewhat new on the market. It's not sold everywhere, but Southwest Fertilizer does have that. And it does a cool thing of opening the soil up and building up kind of your micropopulation. So what we're seeing is gardenias really kind of falling prey to root rot, which it really wasn't something that bothered it before. As kind of what you see with boxwoods and sometimes with azaleas is root rot, and it'll slowly make them fade away. But you really want to avoid it. You've got to stop watering. It's November. We don't have much evaporation anymore, so that ET rating's dropping and we're adding the same amount of water. And so you might be encouraging root rot on those gardenias. So I would just stop watering, put down some Dakota Rev or super seaweed from Microlife, or humic acid, or all three of them mixed together, hey. Yeah, so that's what I go after, Juanita.
I have another one here. As far as lawns go to St. Augustine, what is the best way to fertilize it in a natural way, not using the commercial fertilizers? Can you throw compost?
Absolutely. That's what compost top dressing is.
So this, you just throw compost?
Yep, quarter inch everywhere. And then you've reset the stage, right? You have brought up a bunch of microbes that eat what you've put down. Basically, you've tilled the whole soil that way, just you've micro-tilled. And then earthworms are going to come in, making all these tunnels and stuff like that. Every tunnel they make is future roots. So you're deepening your roots, you're building all this kind of mineral buildup in there that is beneficial. And you're adding a ton of carbon and nitrogen. Everything that you want to do in the soil can happen with a compost top dressing. And then after that, that's when microlife comes in, the 624 or the brown patch, or sweet green from Nitrophos is excellent too. So there's like a lot of good food focused ones. Southwest Fertilizer makes one called Earth Essentials. And if you've already kind of put down compost, that's another really good one. Microlife is kind of the only one that can stand alone because it's been inoculated. So, but again, once every 2 months. I mean, I think I do it twice a year.
So microlife is a compost with that's.
It's not a compost, it's a fertilizer, it's a food mix.
Okay.
So soil food mix. Yeah. And I do really like the Microlife brown patch because it's got a big microbial pack in there to stymie brown patch, which is a really wimpy fungi, let's admit. So, yeah.
That's interesting.
Could you just repeat the Dakota Red and where to buy it?
Yeah, Dakota Rev, like the state Weber's Rev is much bigger on there, REV. Yeah, I think Southwest Fertilizer might be the only thing on the southwest side. Enchanted Gardens and Forest have it. Nelson Nursery, Plants for All Seasons. I know Warren Southern Garden sells a lot of it. I mean, friends, we still have it. Oh, anyway.
I have another question. This
Oh,
is
great.
Wendy.
Wendy,
Well, when you-
yes.
Yeah, I know. Okay, I make my own compost, but when that man was talking about your yard, if I put now also sometimes if we're cutting high, I cut high and sometimes leave the grass clippings on the grass.
Yeah.
But my compost is not like bag compost. It's all broken down. You know, it's broken down, but it has leaves in it, loose leaves. I could just throw that out, or does it have to be mowed more over, kind of compacted?
Yeah. So
Or
I would
fine.
mow it. I would mow it because you have a mulching mower and it can mow it up real quick. The thing about our homemade compost, it's really not compost.
Yeah.
By industry standards, compost has reached 135 degrees for 10 days in a row. And your compost and my compost at home, we're not even monitoring, right? But it's not doing that. And so what that's not doing is that's not letting this kind of massive exchange of microbial life happen on a regular basis. And so we end up not breaking down the plant material very much. And so it's begun, but it's not finished. That's why like aging your compost at home for years is really the thing to do. But yeah, if you wanted to use that, it's still a carbon rich material. And so, but I'd mow it over just so you're mowing everything up real small.
Now, if you were to buy the compost in bags, which one do you recommend?
I mean, as a 15-year professional growing gardens all over the city, nothing is close to Nature's Way. So, and
Okay,
the
and
next
then
two
what
are
about-
Landscaper's Pride and Farm Dirt.
Yeah, now what about plugging? In the fall times, when a lot of times you do plugging for people who have compaction, should they?
Yeah, you're talking about aeration.
That's it, aeration, I couldn't think.
Yeah, the compost, to me, the compost does that by itself.
Okay,
It just does it on a micro scale.
perfect, thank
So,
you.
Yeah, nobody tills as well as grubs and earthworms.
Well, I have a
so-
lot of earthworms in my yard.
Yeah, then you shouldn't need to aerate, right? You just put down compost and they'll aerate for you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much for tuning in. Jeff's got some further thoughts.
Yeah. With my hiccups.
Everyone come out to the Botanic Garden. It's absolutely gorgeous. Also check out Lightscape. So our website, hbg.org, and it's just gorgeous out there. Gotta go.
Thank you, Danny. That was really interesting. I know we've been wanting to have a topic on this, so yeah, glad that learned a little bit more about composting and soil and don't water so much.
Yes.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. And for the questions, sorry for any technical difficulties we had. So our next Tuesday talk will be on December 21st. Old Fashioned Christmas with Bayou Bend, get a glimpse on how Christmas was celebrated in the 18th century. So we are doing a holiday theme for next month. So I hope everyone has a safe Thanksgiving, and I hope it's beautiful weather that we've been having. I hope you've been able to get out and enjoy the nice weather. Do go out and visit the Botanic Gardens. I still need to make that on my calendar and get out there. With that said, I think we are done for the day. Thank you, Akeem. Thank you, Nurturing Home Health Agent Healthcare and Hospice Plus for their sponsorship today. And thank you out there in internet land. And we will see you next month.
Thank you,
very much.
Jeff. Bye.
Bye, everyone.